All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Horist. I lead QRadar product management here at IBM Security, and our session today is going to be about moving beyond the endpoint and really extending into how an open ecosystem for XDR can help companies like yours strengthen your security posture and at the same time simplify the lives of your security teams. So we will be taking Q&A throughout, so please, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat and we'll get to them either during the session or afterwards. I'm happy to definitely save time at the end to address those. So before we dive into really kind of what is Open XDR, I think it's worthwhile to think about how we got here. Why is XDR a topic that is prevalent today? And I think it kind of starts with a history over the last, 10 plus years of the enterprise has been evolving. It's becoming more dispersed. Pre-2020, right? We had applications moving to cloud, users becoming more mobile and more remote. And, in case any organizations hadn't started down those trends yet, they certainly had to adapt very quickly last year, right? With COVID and everyone working remotely from home, everyone, like we are today, is now virtual. People are on their laptops from their homes, logging into cloud-based applications. And we've also seen a lot of organizations shift their workloads and their applications to cloud very much since last year in order to get out of the physical data center business. And so as this has happened, obviously our enterprises have become much more scattered and much more dispersed. And from a security perspective, what this has really meant is that security teams are looking to really put those controls in wherever they can, right? Trying to match where the threats are, match where the data is, match where users are getting into different data and systems that are valuable. And what we're left with now is a security stack that looks a lot like our enterprise. It's scattered, it's dispersed, and things tend to operate in silos. And, what this has created is that, we've got a lot of different tools out there and they all provide value in and of themselves. But when we look at this, it's almost like they're just pieces of a giant puzzle, right? Where these individual tools are valuable, but when you can bring them together and unify them, you can get so much more value out of them. And this isn't even just a technology challenge that we're facing. This also impacts the way that our security teams work, right? The disconnected impact of our tools and the disconnected nature of our tools means that analysts are working with multiple things a day, right? It's not uncommon to see analysts that we talk to switch between 8 to 10 products every day just to try to keep up. Maybe even more than that when you think about all the products that you have in your stack, whether you're talking about endpoint security, cloud security, email and phishing detection products, SIMs, UBAs, the list goes on and on and on, right? And individually, these tools are all very helpful and they serve important purposes. But when they're disconnected, it becomes like this never-ending game of whack-a-mole, right? We've got teams continuously swiveling between different solutions, different screens, different products, trying to keep track of all these different alerts coming in. And even when the alerts actually are part of the same attack campaign, it's really difficult to see this, right? So in this scattered dynamic, we end up, with one, we've got analysts that they're overwhelmed. There are too many alerts in too many different systems and they just can't keep up. We've got, architects and engineers trying to manage and kind of piece together all these disconnected products, and just the administrative burden of that in and of itself is overwhelming. And then lastly, from just a business and budgetary perspective, we're spending a lot of money on these different things, but we're not getting nearly as much value as we potentially could, right? So it's become very unsustainable, right? We're spending money on disconnected tools. Our teams are overwhelmed. Alerts are still being missed. And ultimately, it just becomes very, very tiresome, right? And it's not a great way to work. And that's where some of these conversations around XDR start, right? How do we change this dynamic that we're living in right now? And this is where there's some key aspects that can really help. And when we've looked at teams that have excelled very much in security operations, right? We actually, there was a study that we had worked with the Ponemon Institute on last year that looked at, it was about 3,400 different security practitioners worldwide from different teams. And when we looked at the SOC organizations that were most effective, they really excelled in automation, and integration, because those are things that enable better outcomes. And when we look at this, when we think about kind of how tighter integrations across these siloed solutions can help, and how infusing automation throughout the entire detection, investigation, and response process can help, there are a couple of key outcomes that we're able to achieve as a security team. So firstly, we can get deeper insights, right? We've got more actionable insights into what's happening in the network. So when threats arise, your solution can do things like automatically enrich that alert with information from threat intelligence. It can automatically pull what happened before and what happened after that alert was generated. When it comes to a response perspective, even, are there actions that we can take to automatically execute some containment activities? All for the end goal of, by the time your analyst gets to that incident to address, they're more efficient because they have the information at their hands already. They're in a much better starting point. And now they're able to make faster, more informed decisions about triage and response. They also get, when we think about that context switching that's constantly happening when we don't have these integrations, when we do have these integrations, our teams can be far more productive and far more effective, because instead of looking at 8, 10, potentially more solutions, right, now you can look at one or maybe one or two, right? And that's a much better experience, right? Because as humans, we're not designed for context switching, right? If I have to look at 8 different things and do a search or run some analysis in 8 different systems and then piece that data back together, it's introducing the risk of human error. It's wasting time. It's losing focus too. Right? It's causing the individuals to lose focus. So the more that we can integrate our tools together for these unified workflows, the more efficient and productive and focused our teams can be. And then lastly, when we talk about integrations, I say, if you kind of read the title here, it's about demanding simple integrations. It's about not having you as your own team building this work. It's about pushing for vendors and pushing the vendors that you work with today to work with each other, to build these integrations for you, right? So the more integration work that you can push out to your vendors to do for you, then the less, obviously, development effort that you have to invest, and the more time that you can spend on those security projects that are more strategic to your business or address more of those custom use cases that are very unique to what you do. And I think just kind of to expand on this a little bit further, when we looked at some of these stats out of this survey, we looked at those common practices. What was really interesting is that 63% of the top performing teams, they put that clear focus on interoperable tools. Because for them, that's what really drove their ability to more effectively respond to attacks. And then also 73% of those organizations put very strong focus and actively used automation throughout the entire detection, investigation, and response process. So automation, machine learning, orchestration fully built into their end-to-end processes to strengthen their overall resilience. So, if you're thinking, all right, that's great. What does this have to do with XDR? What's the context here? Is XDR even a thing? I think every year we come to, conferences like RSA and Black Hat, and there's always a new buzzword. And it becomes the question of, is this just a buzzword, or is it something that can really help my team? And I think before we can answer that question, it's important to level set on, what does XDR mean today? And kind of how is it sort of defined as best as we can? And I say sort of defined as best as we can because, if you've been reading about XDR or talking to, colleagues, talking to analysts in the industry, talking to vendors, I think everyone has a little bit of a different perspective there. And that's okay, right? It's an early industry. I think it's actually kind of interesting that even when you talk to different analysts within the same analyst firm, they have slightly different views on what is this XDR thing and what does it become in 3 to 5 years. I think, but despite those differences, right, there are certainly nuances that every individual has, different takes, but fundamentally there are a few key fundamental pillars that everyone seems to agree on, right? First and foremost is that centralized and normalized data. What we're seeing today, I would say sitting here today in May 2021, that centralization of data typically in an XDR world tends to come from a vendor's own security stack. So bringing together their own insights in one unified place. Secondly, the second core aspect has to do with correlation, to turn security data into alerts that are meaningful and provide actionable insights. And then lastly, having this more centralized incident response. I would nuance that incident response piece with, what we typically see right now within kind of this XDR dynamic is that that's not going to be a full SOAR. A full SOAR is very different, meant more for those more complex, more coordinated responses, whereas what we're seeing today from an XDR perspective is more focused on those kind of response actions, those individual actions for enrichment, for containment, not necessarily the full end-to-end cross-functional kind of response that you would get with a SOAR. So I think kind of going through, looking at this, right, kind of sounds familiar to what you've probably been hearing for a while. And so I think that maybe begs the question again of, is this a buzzword, or is there a version of XDR out there that can actually help to transform SOC processes while breaking down these silos across the different scattered solutions and making you guys more effective? And I think that, I would argue that there certainly is a version of XDR that can help truly transform what our SOC processes look like. And this is where we get to this notion of open XDR. So our view is that, we somewhat agree with the pillars that are kind of out there today. And I would say we definitely agree with them, but with a little bit of a different take, right? Quite frankly, where they are now, I think doesn't go far enough in making your lives easier. I think the reality is that all of you listening on the phone right now, all of you guys listening to this session, you've already made investments, and a lot of those investments already work for you, right? So to quote the very American phrase of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, if things work for you, don't spend the money, the time, the effort trying to move to a different solution just to get into this kind of unified, kind of single vendor stack, right? Take advantage of those things that work for you today and get more out of them, right? That when we think about this notion of centralizing and, kind of this first pillar, centralizing and normalizing data, make sure that you're able to do that across all of the vendors in your environment today, right? Your different tools, your solutions, they have to play well together. It's not about ripping and replacing at all. It's about keeping what you have and getting more value out of that, especially if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, that's a whole other story. But for the things that do work for you, get more value out of it. Secondly, when we look at kind of the second pillar around pre-built, tuned correlation that turns security data into those high efficacy incidents, I think that this actually, I'd say there's two pieces here, right? So one is, I kind of highlighted the pre-built and tuned for you. And I say that because when we look at the different security use cases that you guys have to face, right? I would say probably 70% of the incidents, the alerts that you're dealing with are probably coming from repeatable use cases that can apply to a lot of different companies, not just yourselves. Of course, you're going to have unique environments, unique applications, unique threat models that are going to be, maybe you're targeted from a different attacker group because of a specific thing that your business does. And that's obviously going to be custom, right? But for that other 70% that can apply to a lot of different organizations, why build it yourself, right? Let's see how the industry can help you do that, right? So looking to your vendors again for more of that out of the box detection capability and tuning capability. And that's kind of the first phase. And then the second phase of that is that if you are doing the kind of that first pillar, right, and you're being able to centralize and normalize that data across all of your systems, now you're also in a position where you can run those more advanced analytics to get to those higher efficacy alerts around not just known things that are malicious, right, but also those unknown anomalies that are indicative of threats. So being able to apply those more advanced machine learning, user entity network analytics to get to those unknown threat detections. And then lastly, kind of as this last pillar is around response. So certainly believe that incident response should be centralized, but I think there's also, right, much like the second pillar when it comes to, pre-built, there's a lot of things that can be done on your behalf, right? So, if you see, let's say a user suddenly has, So we'll take a very simple example. User has 10 failed logins and then maybe a successful one from a different geography, right? That's a really straightforward use case. You might want to change that user's password. So that means you'd probably want to have an automated response action that can do that automatically without having to have an analyst go talk to someone in IT to then go actually make that change, right? So those are the kinds of things that can be pre-built very easily. And also, when we talk about being able to execute those response actions, you have to have those integrations across your different systems. So I would guess that for everyone who's listening today, no two of you have the exact same combination of tools in your IT and security stack, right? There's probably a lot of overlap, certainly, but they're not going to be the same. And this is why, from an integration perspective, it's really important for vendors to be very open so that we can work with the different solutions, both security solutions and IT solutions that are already in your environment, so that when we go to automate these response actions, you don't have to do a ton of integration work first. It's just made very simple for you, right? So when we look at kind of this notion of XDR, and our view is that it's very much more than a buzzword. It's really more of a practical approach that helps you really transform how your security solutions work together, how your SOC ultimately works, so that you can get those deeper, more connected insights, those more unified workflows, and ultimately be able to act faster and also get more value out of the tools that work for you today. So we continue a little bit further down this notion of being open, right? So we talk about open XDR, very much integrating across different technologies, bringing things together that work. Absolutely, but we don't think that open ends with integration, right? Open is much bigger than just integration. And this is where I think we as an industry can do a much better job of unifying around different standards so that you guys as customers can benefit from that. Really getting to this point where we can ultimately reach that goal of kind of that create once and use multiple times. And when we look at how can you get there, a truly open approach includes a couple of things, right? So common use case formats. So things like using Sigma rules or Snort rules as a standard, where you can, if you're getting some of those use cases from your vendor, those can be deployed actually to any solution in your organization, right? That's the ultimate goal, so that you don't have to write the same use cases in different solutions that you use in different environments or for different use cases, right? So having those more common formats, having things like common query taxonomies. So STIX is a great example here. So if you're able to get to this kind of common query language, you can get to a point where you could actually run one query one time from one interface. And because things are integrated, because things speak the same language, that same query, let's say that you're doing during an investigation or during a threat hunt, can actually go out and run that query on your different solutions and bring back the results in a unified way that makes sense to an analyst. So during those, let's say, stressful investigations or those threat hunts, you're not having to go to those 8, 9, 10 different systems. You're able to go to one system, but get back all that useful, valuable, rich data. I would say also, thinking ahead also just in terms of what are your use cases, aligning to MITRE ATT&CK, being able to understand of all the different solutions in your environment, what's your security posture, right? Where do you really stand, and how do these different products come together to help you bolster your coverage there? And being able to use that as a guide for where are you strong, that's great, but where you're weak, how can you improve that over time and grow your security posture, either through new use cases, new integrations, potentially new capabilities. And then the last piece here around having this kind of open standard and ecosystem focused approach is that you want to get to a point where you have very plug and play integrations, and that those tools are very composable, so that whatever tools you're using, whoever makes them, you're able to easily add them in, integrate different capabilities over time to get more value and get more insights and get more efficiency ultimately. So really when we look at kind of what the open approach to XDR is, it's about integration, but also using those open standards, open formats, and leveraging open frameworks so that your life just becomes much easier. So we look at, what does this look like? If you were to take kind of an example of what does an open approach to XDR mean actually in practice? And I think not surprisingly, since we've been talking a lot about this, firstly, it means keeping what works for you. Being able to very easily and tightly integrate the solutions that you have in your organization today. And I think a lot of that becomes on us as the vendors. That onus is on us to make those integrations easier for you so that you can get to this point where you can have composable security as part of a more unified, open, and connected security platform. You should be able to bring together things like EDRs, network solutions, and cloud workload protection solutions, SIEMs, UBAs, you name it, right? All the things that, again, that work for you can connect in. And when you get to this state where you can effectively and easily integrate your tools, integrate your telemetry, your insights, now you've got better enterprise-wide visibility. You've got detection use cases that are based on open standards, so you're not building the same use cases and multiple solutions. You can have one kind of use case that you can deploy across. You can get those unified analytics for better visibility into those unknown threats, right? So being able to run those more machine learning based analytics across all of your solutions. We talked about that scenario of why you would want a unified query language, right? So when you're doing an investigation or a threat hunt, have one place, one workflow for running that, but be able to go out and enrich that, get all the data, bring all that data back from the different solutions that are part of your environment without having to have one massively large data lake, right? Keeping the data where it is, but using integration to make sense of it. And, I think lastly, of course, is that when you get to that response piece, is that you can have those pre-built response actions that are connected with integrated solutions, both in your security stack and your IT stack, so that when threats are detected, regardless of where they originate, regardless of what response, what systems have to have actions taken on them, you can do that, right? You can automatically kick off those processes for enrichment and containment and any other response processes that you would want to automate there. So we look at, what's really the value here. And I think one of the things that we really see as the value of taking an open approach to extended detection and response is that you can finally properly unify your controls. And when you can properly do that, now you get to a point where your team is able to act faster, act more effectively, more efficiently, and grow the maturity of your security posture, mature your SOC, right? Because ultimately, our goal is to, let you guys focus on the things that matter to protecting your business, right? And so within this kind of open approach, you can get more value out of those solutions that work for you. You can stop duplicating the work that you're doing across different systems and instead be able to kind of build things once and replicate them out through your different connected solutions. Streamline your full process of detection, investigation, and response, right? And, I think ultimately, as you're able to bring these things together, you can, one, become more productive. You can take all that in and burden off of yourselves and push that on your vendors so that you can focus your time on building your own roadmap, on improving your own controls, and not having to focus on kind of that in the weeds development work. So kind of going through this and talking through this, when we think about kind of what can you do next, how can you start your journey to an open extended detection and response capability, I think there's a couple things that we would certainly recommend. So, firstly, look at what's in your security stack today, right? One is, identify where you've got integration gaps that create silos, right? Are there things that could be better integrated today to make your lives easier? I'd say secondly is look at your incident response processes. Are there steps that you guys have to manually take that could instead be automated? I think those are really great starting points to understand, where you can kind of start with building your integration and your automation roadmap. I'd also say when you're doing this, as you're looking at those solutions in your environment that maybe have those gaps, are there certain tools that are difficult to integrate with other parts of your portfolio, other parts of your security stack, right? Because if so, those are going to be the tools that are going to cause you headaches and higher costs because they're kind of living out in their own island. So maybe think through, do you really need those things, or is there maybe other functionality in other products that could help you achieve that same outcome, right? Because in an open extended detection and response world where things are connected, where you are more effective and more efficient, you need those solutions to be well integrated, and they need to have the ability to be integrated. So maybe think through, do you have the right solutions, or are there things that you could maybe consolidate in order to get greater value? So kind of once you have that baseline, I would say definitely in the long term, look at, how you can execute in that roadmap. Think about those areas where, what are the things that you're doing that would provide the greatest value? So what are the things that are highly repeatable, the actions maybe that are highly repeatable, that they happen, they're done frequently, and they're very manual. That's a great starting point, right? What gets done a lot manually that could be automated? And then, another aspect would be, are there certain things that have to get run in the same way across multiple different solutions, right? Are there ways where you could maybe integrate those things together in some capacity, so that instead of doing the same action 8 times in 8 different solutions, you could do it once and still get the same result, right? So things like that can really help you. And I'd say throughout this process, talk to your vendors for sure, right? Talk to them about working together on these integrations. Do what you can to make your life easier, because for us on the vendor side, if we build an integration and we enable that for all of our customers, it's a lot less time than all thousands of you guys doing that same thing over and over again, right? It kind of goes back to that nature of do it once, use it many times, right? That's where your vendors can certainly help you. Ultimately, right, at the end of the day, in order to be successful, you've got to be efficient. And an open, integrated approach to extended detection and response can really help you become more efficient and become more productive as a security operations team. So I would certainly encourage you following this session to go back after RSA conference is over, take a look at your security stack. Think about how those tighter integrations and improved automation can really help bring you more unified, more actionable insights throughout your full detection, investigation, and response process. Because ultimately, your goal, right, is to become faster, obviously reduce time spent on more administrative type tasks, development type tasks that you can offload, and, reduce your, reduce that overhead, get more value out of your solutions that you have, and improve your overall security posture. So with that, I would say thank you for attending our session today. We will certainly be open to any questions at this point.